right, great. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session of Digitalization of National Education Systems. Ricardo is actually going to kick it off first with his part of the session, and then it's going to be a nice interview. I'm really excited about an interview with Dr. Maurice McNaughton and myself. So without further ado, we'll just have Ricardo go ahead and start. Go ahead, Ricardo Allen, who is the CEO of One-on-One Educational Services.
Can you hear? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ricardo Allen. I'm the president and CEO of One-on-One Educational Services Limited. And today I'll be just spending, my part of the presentation. Obviously, Leanne, she'll be presenting, our Chief Operating Officer, on digitizing education systems. My job, however, is just to kind of get your feet wet in terms of not only digitizing education system, but certainly how do we upskill our workforce, right? That's the focus of my presentation. I'm just gonna share with you a few slides. One-on-one, since starting our operations back in 2013, actually, it's been 7 years. We've focused a lot on individual learning, personalized learning, creating online learning space for students, businesses, and so on. But in the midst of a COVID pandemic, right, where the entire workforce is going to change drastically, we're talking about persons shifting industries, we're talking about new industries emerging. How do we adjust our training? How do we upskill our workforce? How big is the problem? And when do we start? What do we need to start? So I'll be presenting on these items just to give you an idea. And, at the end of this, I would have loved to take some questions, but certainly we're going to go in Leanne's presentation. But I just want to jump in, right? So let's start out by kind of looking at a tweet that I actually saw this morning subsequent to me preparing this presentation. Can you all stop with a degree means nothing line, right? If nobody needed a tertiary degree, we wouldn't see job descriptions asking for them. A degree means something, it just won't guarantee a great salary, right? So this is what one user said. And then, we go over to Elon Musk and these top executives. They're saying a college degree is not required for a job at Tesla, the leading automotive company in terms of electric automotive company in the world. And Google and Apple, they have followed suit. Netflix as well. They don't require a 4-year degree to employ persons. But what do they require, right? And let's kind of dissect. Are we talking about 4-year degree, or are we talking about college, right? Well, welcome to the fourth revolution, people, where the focus has to be on skills, not necessarily a degree, but the skills that you have. So whether it's a degree that gives you that skill or a short course, it's all important, right? Now, let's go way back, right? The first revolution, steam engines, we know about that. That was fueling production. Then we went into the era of the second revolution, which focused a little on electric energy to create mass production. And then the third revolution, microcomputers, right? Microprocessors, electronics, back in 1969. And then we are in our fourth revolution, right? Where, the idea is that we want to connect all the various elements of production. It's going to be automated. It's going to be real time. And technologies such as cloud and big data analytics is certainly driving that. But what does learning and development looks like in the fourth revolution, right? And I want to give you some ideas behind that. So the first we want to talk about is fill the widening skills gap, right? You know, what I always tell my students, you know, when we're at university is that, you know, when you spend 4 years to do a degree, what usually happens is that the world almost moves at such a fast pace that by the time you're done, the case studies that you have studied and all of those nice things are no longer relevant or as relevant, right? And so there's a gap between what you're learning and kind of what is required in the workplace. And here you see where organizations have a responsibility in a fourth revolution framework to provide their employees full-time remote, deskless, gig employees, you know, with training that support their career progression, right? You know, this calls for a stronger talent pool. And this is how organizations can actually maintain a competitive advantage. I can tell you now that a number of employees actually, after about 2 or 3 years, want to move on to a new challenge, that sort of thing. Some of them worry about taking time off from work to go and study. But if you kind of provide that opportunity on the job, then it becomes a little easier, right, to keep that employee and to attract new team members. What about addressing the multi-generational workforce? So we have the baby boomers, right? Those are persons who would have been born between 1950s, the 60s, that sort of thing. They're now transitioning out of the workforce, right? And now you have the Gen Z coming in, and then you have the millennials who are getting management positions and vice president positions and even CEOs of companies, right? So what you're finding here is that a wide range of individual differences, right? You know, work preferences, motivations, ethics, leadership style, you know, it comes with a multi-generational workforce, right? And to succeed in the fourth revolution, it's important to take these differences into account, the way people learn, and move forward towards a more personalized, customized training solution. What we're saying now is that the workforce is so diverse, right? You have the Gen Z, the millennials, the baby boomers, all in the same place. So whatever solution that we're putting forward has to be personalized enough to be attractive to each of those components. What about maximization of youth talents, right? We got stats recently suggesting that approximately 11.8%, this is a global figure, guys, youth unemployment rate is currently what obtains. And what's even more is that 3 times more likely they are to be unemployed than adults. And with fresh perspectives, right, that younger generation can offer your organization, you know, we should really start investing in these talents. So think about getting someone out of high school and developing that person towards that manager, that person that we want to be. This is the new way of training in the fourth revolution. So instead of going directly into universities, you have a lot of youths who are leaving high school, going into the working world, and they're being trained on the job. And then finally, you know, and this kind of dovetails nicely into the fourth point, which says, you know, in the fourth revolution, we really ought to foster a corporate learning culture, right? There's an increasing demand for organizations to improve their internal talent pools by creating healthy corporate learning culture. You demonstrate that the organization values education, supports the continuous development of your workforce, right? Learning on the job, taking a skill-based course on the job, taking a project management course on the job. That's the new way of doing it. Now, with all of this, there are challenges, right? There are a lot of challenges that we have to kind of address, right? And one of the major ones that we've seen in recent research is that 46% of degree holders are actually not using what they learned at universities on the job. That's a problem, right? And this is why the fourth point that we just discussed is so important. Learning on the job, right? And this is exactly what we've coined here: automated learning in the workplace. That's the order of the day, right? And what this means is while you're at university, you're in a lecture room, you're at business school, live lecturers, sharing, you're seeing who you're dealing with. On the job, it's more along the lines of real-time learning, live degrees, that sort of thing. So learning on the job. The problem with this is many people at work actually don't have the time to do training, right? So it has to be a way that is almost suited for the modern day learner. It has to be a way that is suiting for the Gen Z, the millennial, the baby boomer, who all forms a part of the modern day learner. Now let's look a little deeper into the modern day learner. And we have this guy, looks very attentive, that sort of thing. But this is not the modern day learner, guys. This is absolutely not the modern day learner. The modern day learner, they're absolutely overwhelmed. We're talking about 41% of the time these workers are spending doing things that offer little personal satisfaction and do not help them to get work done, right? Especially, I mean, they're at home. I mean, I know a lot of business executives are on this call. I don't want to paint this picture in your head about team members being at home on their beds kind of thing, but they're absolutely overwhelmed. And then addition to that, we have 67% of these team members, they complain that they don't have enough time to actually do their jobs. And if you think working at home will help, they have the kids, they have the family members, all of these things, right? So they are overwhelmed. They're also very distracted, right? They're very distracted. We're talking about 9 times per hour the average team member actually spends unlocking their phones, right? So it's 9 times per hour on average. That's almost that's a very interesting number, right? So every hour, 9 times is how many times you're unlocking your phone. 5 minutes, that's the number. 5 minutes. Workers get interrupted every 5 minutes. Ironically, these are from like collaboration tools that they're using, especially now they're at home, they're remote. So they have to use whether it's the Microsoft Teams, whatever you use to stay in touch with your team members, that's the very same thing that is causing them to be distracted. And then, you know, we have the apps and the websites, you know, the YouTube and the social media. Naturally, you know, you don't want to see your team members posting on social media throughout the day, but it happens. It's a very distracting world. And they're also very impatient, right? The research tells us, you know, we did a study along with Harvard last year about March, where we found that the average time to actually, you know, for videos online for adults, right, is actually anywhere between 6 to 9 minutes. But it goes even further because most learners won't watch a video beyond 4 minutes of video content. So for those companies who are perhaps sharing learning content, 10, 30 minutes, that sort of thing, it won't work. It has to be short, it has to be snappy, and it has to be bite-sized, right? It has to be sticky. We call that sticky learning at one-on-one. We create learning content that sticks, that's sufficiently short, to the point, and get the message across. What about 5 to 10 seconds? That's our number. Online designers, right? Content designers now have between 5 and 10 seconds to grab attention of these team members before they click away, and they will click, right? So you have a very short time span to grab their attention, and you know, you don't want to make that more than about 4 minutes thereabout. You go to 5, that's okay too, right? So they're very impatient. So we're talking about the modern day learner, right? And then here's the big one, right? 1% of workers is you know, 1% of a typical work week, sorry, is all that an employee has to focus on training and development. So we speak about reskilling our public sector. We speak about reskilling our SMEs. Well, they only have 1% of their time, their work week, right? Which is not a lot. We're talking about a 40-hour work week. 10% of that is 4 hours, right? And then you talk about 10% of that, which is 1%, and you're really not talking about much, right? So they don't have a lot of time to actually take courses, right? This pretty much works out to a very small number. But when we look to the right here, we're kind of seeing some of the reasons, right? So we're seeing 30% of full-time employees do most work somewhere other than the employee's location. If you have developers, this works absolutely well. They need to be focused, that sort of thing. And 20% of the workforce comprises of temps, contract workers, freelancers. Now in a COVID context, this is going to expand. It's on demand. Employees are actually accessing information and learning differently than they did just a few years ago, guys, right? Most are looking for answers outside of traditional training and development channels. For example, many people are using the good old Google, right? They're using the search engines to find the information. 70% are doing it. And we're also seeing roughly about 50 to 60% taking online courses. And that's a big number. Obviously, in Jamaica, we have some way to go, but that's a big number. And people are increasingly turning to their smartphones to actually find just-in-time answers to unexpected problems, right? You know, just snap out that phone and then go. But what if your organization had a situation where you had a knowledge base, just like you had Google, and you can just search for just about anything that you want? That's a part of learning and development, right? Collaborative. Learners are also developing and accepting personal and professional networks to obtain information about their industry and professions. And that's the truth, right? So they're running to LinkedIn and all of those things to actually find out more. And that's a part of the learning process. Now, what about being empowered? Rapid change in business and organization means that everyone needs to constantly be learning, right? It's changing so fast. And, you know, I was in a board meeting just this morning, and chairman would have mentioned that, you know, if you take months to adapt to COVID, your business will fall behind. You have to be quick. You have to be agile. It has to be almost instantaneously, right? A weekend, a month. So more and more people are looking for options on their own because they aren't getting what they need. The employers are simply taking too long to provide the training that's needed. So what they have to do is to go where the training exists, whether it's on Google, whether it's on YouTube, whatever they need to do, they're doing it. Now, we have a global dilemma, right? And that dilemma is not foreign to Jamaicans. And I want to kind of zone in on the Jamaican context, right? So we now know who the, who the modern learner is. Let's talk about our case of Jamaica, right? So in Jamaica, we have, if you look at comparisons across several countries, right? And I have India here, Mexico, the United States. Obviously, we're expected to be behind them, right? No problem. What you're looking at here is a percentage of the population with completed tertiary education, okay? And Jamaica is roughly right there below 15%. But sadly, we're still lagging behind, right, guys? The Caribbean still has the lowest level of its population accessing tertiary education. And we define tertiary education for this purpose as being persons who has some training beyond secondary school, right? That's kind of how we'd like to define tertiary education. And we have a very big national problem here in Jamaica. The workforce in Jamaica stands at about 1.5 million people. It's a little less than that, right? But if you take 15% or the percentage of people who are actually not educated beyond a secondary level, you're looking at about 200 plus employees, right? And then what's even more is that what does the pipeline look like? Meaning how many people are currently being trained to enter the workforce? Well, 19% of persons ages 19 to 24 are actually enrolled in tertiary education. That's not a big number. To see how small that number is, if we were to take whatever that number is and fit it in a parish, that's simply Clarendon. And then you have Maypen as being the capital, right? So it's not large. So we have a problem, right? We have an undereducated workforce. So let's talk about the issues that kind of lends itself to that, right? Well, we have an issue with scale and quality, meaning how do we train that gap that we have to basically take on the challenges of our country in terms of the public sector, and how do you train your team members to take on the challenges of that company? Well, if you were to dissect that number and look at, let's say, Gen Z, 500,000, millennials, about 300,000, and then we have Gen Z, sorry, as being 400,000. Then we have about the 1.2 million who are actually the workforce that are without some tertiary education, right? Now, let's look at a possible fix to that. What if we were to take this number, right? 1.2 million people, who are the number of persons in our workforce that we're saying are undereducated in some way. And let's suppose we took that number, and there are roughly about 10 universities and about 71 colleges in Jamaica, and we estimate that they have a maximum capacity of about 120,000, right? Now, let's say we took that 1.2 million, and the challenge is, how long would it take to actually train all of those persons, right? And let's say in year one, we took 60,000 students off that number. In year two, we took another 60,000 all the way to year 10. That's 600,000 students. We still would not train the entire workforce. In fact, it would take us probably about 20 years to train them using traditional means. It's not going to work, right? That's not going to work. And so there has to be an alternative. And so the solution to actually upskill and reskill our workforce has to be online. And I'm going to just end this presentation by leaving with you some parameters of what that solution must look like, right? First of all, it requires scaling in IT in terms of the infrastructure at the universities and these training organizations. Just sorry for that typo, guys. That should be content. To offer these courses in short, bite-sizes format. We have to repurpose our content. We also have to have a flexible education system allowing for persons to earn those skills on the go, right? So instead of these traditional 4-year programs, we have to now look for shorter, bite-sized courses that offers you credits that goes towards, let's say, a master's degree instead of leaving a company to go and take a master's degree. And then there has to be zero restriction, right? So we talk about internet for all, zero rated data on the content that's being offered by these universities and these training solutions. And one-on-one, having kind of seeing this problem, you know, what we've gone ahead and doing, and this is something that we're actually launching in January, is to create a massive online platform where we have partnered with the universities to actually truncate their courses, and we will be offering one space that anybody, whether in the public sector or a small business, can go online, get certified by any university in the Caribbean, and earn themselves a skill. Ladies and gentlemen, that has to be the solution. The solution has to be online, it has to be on demand, and it has to be at your own convenience. So, you know, this is my kind of, you know, quick presentation on how to reskill the workforce, right? To recap, it requires us to invest heavily in making the content available from these universities, and COVID has certainly accelerated that. It requires companies to actually foster a learn on the job approach, right? So public sectors, private sector companies, allowing their team members to take these short bite-sized courses on the go. And it requires almost a generational shift in how we view degrees and skills, right? You know, one of our best web developers at One-on-One, he has no degree. He has a few courses in online website development, and this is what he has doing everything that he's doing. That's the new way in the fourth revolution, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Ricardo Allen. And now, you know, we do want you to stick around for this interview as well. So Dr. Maurice McNaughton It's so weird calling you anything else in the public space, right? So I'll just stick to calling you Dr. Maurice McNaughton. And then after we can have some Q&As for both, Ricardo's presentation and this conversation as well. So as the interviewer, would you like to go ahead, Dr. Maurice McNaughton?
Okay, thank you very much, Leanne. Good afternoon, everyone. As Leanne said, my name is Maurice McNaughton. I'm based at the Mona School of Business and Management. And, every other institution that's involved in the business of education. It doesn't matter what level, primary, secondary, higher education, vocational training and education. All of us have been grappling with the transformation of our educational systems to respond to this, the effects of COVID-19. And so whether you're a teacher or school administrator or a policymaker, we're all trying to figure out how to manage the transition to this new education reality. So I'll tell you, I'm delighted to have a conversation this afternoon with someone who's right at the heart of this educational revolution, and not just someone, but an organization that is. And so I guess in the formality interview, as Ms. Leanne McNaughton. She's the Chief Operating Officer of One-on-One Educational Services. You've just heard quite a bit from Ricardo, the CEO, on some of the exciting things that One-on-One is engaged in. Good afternoon, Leanne.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Listen, the backdrop of this conversation, and I say conversation, right? It's really an interview. I'd like to make it quite conversational. The backdrop for this is that One-on-One has just rolled out a centralized national virtual system for the country of Bahamas. Quite impressive, actually. Perhaps and in the Caribbean, is that correct? Yeah, I think so.
At this scale, what I will clarify and say, right? So we have the virtual learning portal, but it was more than just the learning part of things, and we can get into that, right? Because we have the educational management part, which is the administrative area.
Well, we're going to get into that, Leanne. This is my interview, and you're my daughter, and you're a favorite person, but this is going to be a tough interview. So.
Yes, I know.
Anyway, so you've been a project manager for this this quite ambitious initiative. And your would or have inferred by now that Leanne is related to me, but that's immaterial for the purposes of this conversation. So I have some questions, Leanne and Ricardo. I mean, you obviously are leading this overall one-on-one effort, so feel free to weigh in. But the first question I want to ask you, Leanne, as the education sector grapples with responding to COVID-19, we've heard an array of terminology. We've heard about virtual school, online learning, blended learning, remote teaching. You chose to title this session as the digitalization of national education systems. Your choice, and I think that was quite deliberate. Just explain the significance of what you mean by digitalization of an education system.
Okay, thank you. That's a great first question. And yeah, it was very intentional to call it digitalization, right? Because what people might not wrap their mind around is that it is more than just procuring a piece of technology and expecting it to work. It's more than just, if you're now online, just setting up Zoom sessions and expecting it to work at scale across all schools or multiple schools. But what digitalization of an educational system means is the people, the upskilling of the people to be able to use it, right? How do you transform the teachers that go from chalk and talk to now using the technology and using it well, right? You also have to think about it's not just going from the physical space to the digital space and expecting it to work, right? So it's a complete transformation in that approach instead of just moving from physical to virtual. It's also about the mindsets of the end users as well, the students and the parents. How do they change their way of working and using the technology to be able to do it? How do I go from just going into a class and sitting down and participating to have the technology and knowing how to use the technology to be able to handle it? I see that there's a little dark here, right? And then also the processes, right? So the processes have to change as well and transform as well. So we move from just like I say, it's not just transforming the physical space, the papers, instead of just transforming the textbook to now virtual and making it online. You have to change how it is used as well. So digitalization is more than just procuring technology, but it's the mindset, it's the upskilling of the people, it's including a different process and transforming the process for it to be able to work.
And so that is what that raises the spec, one of the key that we want to talk about, which is how do you do this to scale? And I guess the question I would ask you within the context of Caribbean and educational ecosystems, do you believe that this is the right approach, this centralized, almost enterprise approach versus a more distributed approach where each school can choose to deploy that suits and their budget? So whether it's Zoom or Google Classroom, or an array of other solutions. Is this large-scale enterprise approach one for Caribbean context? And Ricardo, feel free to weigh in on this idea as well.
Okay, so that's an interesting question, right? Because doing the project in the Bahamas. So in the Bahamas, the Ministry of Education has chose One-on-One's platform to be the single source of truth for the primary and secondary educational system, right? Versus here in Jamaica, it's a more decentralized approach, right? And so I can't say, if one answer is the right solution, but there are different approaches and different ways to make it work, right? In the case in the Bahamas, it's centralizing it and having it to be one platform. You can things at a level. You can understand things at a national level from a single point, from a single place, in collecting all of this data, standardize all of this data, centralizing the data for better decision making at the ministry level. So it's very advantageous to have it at one platform level instead of decentralizing it for the ministry for better decision making and understanding where are the schools and how are they doing, where are the students and how are they learning, right? What decisions do we need to make? Where is the shortages? Where do we need to do things differently and better? So that's the benefit of having one platform at the ministry level. Ricardo?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Leanne. Excellent answer. So here's the thing, Dr. McNaughton and audience, right? We had the benefit, obviously, during COVID as being the Ministry of Education virtual school in Jamaica. And we've also had the benefit of digitizing the entire Bahamian school system. And what the problem we had post-COVID was the ministry, for example, needed to know how many students from which schools were impacted, what skills they would have attained, and where they are now. Now, we could give them that information, and that's the benefit of a central system. But it goes further than that. It's not just the learning, as Leanne mentioned. Digitization means getting a central database of every single student, teacher, stakeholder in the entire country. Having that in one centralized place, and then an hybrid approach can be adopted now where whichever learning tool that you opt to use, it must be integrated with that central system so that at the end of the day, the ministry always has complete and factual information on every child within the country. In a COVID environment, there are kids who simply will get left behind in the digital divide. We want to know who those persons are. We want to know which students are attending school and which students are not attending school. And those are the things that you get from having a centralized system. So the solution has to be, just further on to what Leon mentioned. It has to be a centralized database. And we use what's called the EMIS to accomplish this. It's an education management information system that must be centralized. But what can be decentralized and distributed can be the learning tool that is selected. The issue with that, you will find, however, is that it causes operational resources to increase because the ministry now has to spend funds in training how to use multiple platforms, where it would be easier to have one platform where everyone is being trained on to get going. That said, you do have people having a certain competence in the various platforms. So the quickest, most practical approach has to start with a distributed approach, but over time, it has to consolidate into a centralized approach, and that has to be the way of the future.
All right, so the merits, as you've both outlined, are clear. I want to talk a little bit about the challenge of scaling a single platform to meet the demands of thousands of teachers, tens of thousands of students, maybe hundreds of administrators. So let's talk a little bit about the challenge of scale. Let's just start with the numbers, Leanne. So tell me about the project. How many schools, how many teachers, how many students and administrators are involved in this national effort?
Okay, for the Bahamas, right? So even though it's an entire country, it's small numbers considered to Jamaica, but it has at the public school level, there are 160 public schools. There are 2,800 teachers, and there are 45,000 students that are participating in this.
Sorry, say again, how many students?
So 160 schools, 2,800 teachers, 45,000 students.
Okay, all right, and that's a small Caribbean country, right? Tell me a bit about some of the technology infrastructure strategies that one-on-one had to use to kind of elastic demand. So for instance, 8 o'clock in the morning when the term opens, 20 or 30,000 students are going to be logging on. So you're going from 0 to max. Talk a little bit about some of the technology strategy to kind of scale up, and what we'll talk about elastic demand, because it's going to be scaling up and scaling down as this school day progresses.
Okay, so I'll let Ricardo talk about the back-end infrastructure, and then I'll talk about what the front-end infrastructure for the end users to be able to use. So talk about the back-end infrastructure, Ricardo.
Now, listen, I'll be quick, right? Look, never have we had a situation of COVID ever before, right? It has been bad, but not this bad. And what has happened is that we had a situation where students were taken out of school in March. They had an eager to get back to school in September. It was further delayed. So all the models that we had to say, well, the first day of school, students were going to come on, and they're going to come on at this rate, and we prepared the system. Now, what we have to understand is, how do you prepare a system for that level of scale, right? And there are two ways to do it. We make an initial assumption to say, well, X number will start out, and essentially it will increase, and then it will kind of stay at a level footing throughout the entire day. What we saw, Dr. McNaughton and audience, is that an entire nation came on the system at the same exact time. And little did we know that, the ministry had told parents to come on at the exact time, and you know the challenges that can have on an Amazon infrastructure. And so we have auto scaling built into our platform, where whenever students would come on at a certain rate, the platform automatically expands to accommodate the need. Now, we allow the platform to expand vertically, and the reason we do that is a central database is important, but whatever resources are required to meet the demands, the platform expands to accommodate that. And then finally, finally.
So no, Ricardo, I'm like, what technology? I'm sure people want to know, how did we able to do this? I know Amazon and the database infrastructure. So just tell him, like, what type of actual infrastructure did we implement to be able to do this?
So let me just tell you brief, right? Without going too much, because you know there are security considerations to think about there. Amazon actually just did an article on how one-on-one was able to accommodate over 200,000 students in COVID, right? And the article is available, I'll share it. But in short, it's the LMS, Learning Management System, on an Amazon infrastructure that started out as being serverless, meaning a man was not required to be there. But what we had to move to quite quickly was doing a structure allowing for that vertical, horizontal scaling, but also load testing. We had to do extensive load testing prior to see the various scenarios and the models. So whether it is students would attack the platform, whether it is they would come on over a certain time, and all of these things we had to prepare ourselves to do. Also, as Leanne will kind of mention, we simply could not find the hands, Dr. McNaughton, to have people supporting 50,000 users all at once. So we had to use artificial intelligence, as Leanne will point out, to automate the support process. So parents and students are asking for support, and it's actually a robot who is actually supporting them until it gets to a point where it is handed off to a human. So it required a number of things. We have a team in Jamaica, we have a team in another island who were simply manning the ship, seeing user behavior and adjusting our platform in an agile way to accommodate the expansive use of the platform.
Fascinating. I look forward to the article of this particular case study. But here's the other question. You're not only scaling horizontally in terms of the entire educational population, you're also scaling vertically in functionality, so that the one-on-one platform is integrating the learning management system with the web conferencing system that allows for synchronous live school, with the school administrative system that you mentioned in the back end. And conventionally, that's actually 3 different technologies. So talk a little bit about the functional role of each of these components and the integration challenge, which is one of the other scale issues, right? How do you stitch these things together so that they work seamlessly?
Leanne?
Yeah, challenge is it does not accurately describe how hard it was to do, right? So the question is, how do we provide a seamless experience between the LMS, the learning management system, that is where the learning takes place, right? Think of the LMS as literally the virtual classroom, right? Where the teachers and the students interact and engage. So you have the LMS. Then you have it needs to integrate with the EMIS, which is actually the source of truth. The EMIS is the Educational Management Information System. That is considered like the school office, the administrative areas. So all of in the EMIS is the source of truth in terms of the data, where all of the schools populate the student data, the school data, the class data, all of that, right, is the source of truth. And it needs to seamlessly and synchronously talk to the LMS to ensure that the data is accurate, to ensure the students are in the right classes, to ensure the teachers are in the right classes, to ensure all of that. And then how do we then verify and authenticate you are who you are as a teacher? So we integrated with Office 365 because the Bahamas is using Office 365, right? And that entire platform. So we integrated Office 365 to have the single sign-on to talk between the LMS and the EMIS and to say, this teacher is who they are and they're supposed to log in only to their correct school and the teacher to their correct class. Right? So we have those 3 platforms that need to seamlessly and synchronous and all the time talk with each other. It was very difficult, right? And then on top of that, we also integrated with video conferencing tools because you still need to learn. The point of all of this is for the schools to be able to learn. So we integrated with Microsoft Teams, and then also you can, and recently with any video conferencing tool. It was a lot of work to have all of these technologies always to be talking to each other and to be accurate, right? Of course, you know, the data needed to be accurate from going to the EMIS to the LMS and back to the EMIS, right? So that was in terms of the front end, all of the different technologies and how to make it seamlessly
Fascinating.
work.
I know my colleagues like Dr. Nyla Rao Graham will be itching to write up a case study around this. But let's move from the technology scale issues to maybe a little bit on the softer side, some of the challenges of scale in a socio-political context. So, I mean, those of us who have worked in enterprise systems implementation appreciate very well the challenges of scaling these complex socio-technical systems. And those challenges go well beyond technology. You're talking here about a national education ecosystem that would involve many systems, people, processes, political, social, and economic institutions. First of all, talk about the effort of training thousands of teachers on a national level so that they're able to turn up on day one. Let's start there. The teachers, and we know teachers cover a wide spectrum from maybe fairly recently trained teachers who are more tech, sort of, you know, than chalk and teachers. Talk about that training effort.
Right. So the training, interestingly, the Bahamas, and it's so interesting seeing the difference between what has happened in Jamaica versus the Bahamas, right? And so I am talking positively about the Bahamas because we're a little bit, I know in Jamaica, I'm Jamaican, we're a little bit ahead of the curve in the Bahamas in terms of actually getting it right. But during COVID, and our virtual school principal in COVID said, if you make the teachers happy, we will have a successful program and platform, right? And so from COVID times, there was a lot of upskilling and transformation of the mindset and comfort level to be able to use the technology, right? Because like I said, the teachers are coming from chalk and talk. I just come in the room, I go to the chalkboard and I talk, and then that's it. So there was actually a series of professional development trainings that happened from April to June, July in the Bahamas. And then again, there was a lot of training sessions that had to take place to get the teachers comfortable with, one, using the LMS. Two, how do I transform my engagement? How do I engage my students differently, right? Because it's one to just get up and teach. It's now I'm battling with students that lay down in their bed and half paying attention and want to go play games. How do I transform my content and my material for it to be engaging, right? So we had to spend a lot of upskilling on not just how to use the platform, but how to deliver the content. Right? And we're still doing the training on that for teachers. And what people fail to understand, that is not just the teachers that we had to upskill, because people actually thought maybe you use less teachers now because it's technology, right? You're using technology. You actually have to use more teachers because you have main teacher that's speaking, then you need teacher aides in the chat room that's supporting and helping, right? And then teachers that need to be able to prepare the material. So all of that is there in just to deliver class. Right? And what people fail to understand, one more point, what people fail to understand that there was also the preparation, the administrative areas. We also had to upskill the administration, the principals, the vice principals, all of those people. And now these principals are 50, 60, a lot older, right? They're literally used to printing, typing. We had to spend, and we're still spending a lot of time upskilling the administration to be able to use the emails, to be able to see attendance at this place, to be able to use the platform, the EMIS platform, to get ready for the LMS. So that's what I mean. Digitalization is more than just the technology. A lot of time is spent on upskilling the actual people to use the technology, because if they don't, they'll just throw the technology away and say it doesn't work, or the students say it won't work. So we're investing a lot of time and effort in upskilling the teachers and the administration to be able to use it and adapt it.
And invariably, a project at this kind of national level must, I mean, you know, without a doubt, must intersect with the political and administrative bureaucracy of the public sector.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you wish to share in terms of some of the challenges and strategies for navigating kind of environment, especially doing this in a different country with different, maybe political and social culture?
Right. Okay, I'll speak a little on that and then I'll hand it over to Ricardo. It's hard, okay? Let me not butter it up, because this, I mean, obviously during COVID, we said it has never been done before. Even all the people that we partnered with, they have never onboarded a country or onboarded anybody virtually, right? And so we're doing all of this virtually and working with the Bahamian team. So when things did not go work, so it's really hard, one, not being physically there to do the trading and to understand the educational system. So us here in Jamaica, understanding the Bahamian educational system, right? And understanding how to make that work. That was extremely difficult to do while at the same time getting ready for school in a short period of time. And then when things happen, right? Which we had challenges. I know you're referring to what the challenges that we experienced. The first day of school, I can say this vocally, we did flop, right? Because we actually, you know, we were not, like Ricardo said earlier, we did not anticipate everybody logging in at the exact same time. All the schools told the parents to log in at 8:40 a.m. And we were not prepared for everybody to be logging in at 8:40, right? We expected, you know, a smooth transition going up, right? So when we had the challenges of the system going down and how do you maneuver those and positively say, marketing and communications comes into play a lot, right? And then when you have the union that, you know, is questioning, you know, all of these that are happening. So it became very political, because I know that's a question that you're asking me. It became very political. How did we maneuver that, you know, working with the communication team from our side, as well as the Bahamian ministry, you know, to say, you know, we can do this. It does take time, you know, to understand that this is a transition for us all, and work with us to solve the problem, not just saying it doesn't work.
Ricardo? Thank you so much, Leanne. You know, what I would say is this, right? Education has not changed for the past 400 years in any drastic way. It has remained the same in recent times. And what COVID has really done is to accelerate the future of education. You know, what we attempt to do by digitizing a national education system is effectively taking 400 years of doing it one way and trying now to do it another way. There will be problems. And because of that reason, it is super important to have all the stakeholders from both sides of the aisle on the same page in terms of them understanding that, look, a digitization of your education system requires 5 years at the maximum, 3 years at the minimum, right? What we saw with COVID was we had to make a decision. Do we digitize the education system, or do we merely provide a COVID solution, right? Which is more or less making available Google for Classroom for persons to use online. And we took the approach to digitize the system. And so what we had to do, audience, is to take 3 years, rationalize that down into 6 months, and do what is important to get started, as Leanne mentioned. Understanding that it requires an agile process to continuous release and delivery. And that is where the geopolitical issues comes into play. Expectations versus reality. Some people are expecting you to work wonders in that short time, while some people understand. The last thing, we have one solution. That's the digitized solution. But there are a multiplicity of issues feeding into that solution. Issues with students not having access to internet, students not having access to computer devices, parents are not home to supervise them, and all of that gets kind of thrown into a melting pot, and it boils up and it runs over. And people are now saying we having issues. They're not having an issue with your platform. They're having an issue and frustrated with the greater issues that come with digitizing a system. So there are political issues, there are issues, but we resolve them through communication and through involving the stakeholders at several levels so that they come on this journey with us and be very upfront about the facts. The facts are, it takes time, but at the end of the day, it is the long-term sustainable solution, which is a digitized system. Right now, the Minister of Education in the Bahamas can click a button and see how many students are in class, how many students are not in class, what they're learning, and how long they have taken to learn it. And that, my friend, is powerful. Powerful because it dovetails now into what we spoke about earlier, which is the workforce. If I know what my students are learning and what they are producing, then I can better adjust policies and make decisions to inform a new reskilled workforce in terms of entries.
Excellent, excellent. I would love to see the project in Bahamas become a kind of blueprint for all education in the Caribbean. Maybe that's something that you guys should come and have a conversation with academia about. This has to be a collaborative effort. I think the round shortly. I have just one or two other more personal questions for you, Leanne, if you don't mind. You and most people know that you've dedicated a lot of your time in recent years working with young persons, especially young women, facilitating and encouraging the use of technology as a catalyst for building, for self-empowerment. Much of that through YCDI, which is your foundation. Those are more personal level where you're impacting 10 persons and working with individuals. Here on this project, the impact is thousands. Which of these give you more satisfaction? Impacting one individual in Rose Town and changing their perspective and their view of the world, or impacting 30,000 kids in the Bahamas?
I mean, it's hard to choose because both gives its own different type of satisfaction, right? Because literally leading the transformation between, like what Ricardo said, that education has not changed ever, right? And now being at the forefront of transforming an entire educational system at a national level. That's pretty satisfying, right? To see all of the moving pieces make that work together and then actually see it work, right? So when you think of being able to accomplish this, it's not so much about the people, but the actual transformation process stick and work and knowing that it works. That's very satisfying versus working individually with people and helping them get it, right? Because, you know, I'm all about the transformation of the mind as well as the transformation of the process. So I'm not going to choose. Both of them provide a different level of satisfaction for me, but the transformation of the educational system I never thought I would be put in a place to be able to do something like this, but it is extremely gratifying to say that we are doing it. Obviously, we're just at the start, but to see it unfold, it's pretty exciting process.
Okay, we're just start, as you say. Okay, to wrap up, 30 seconds, each of you. What is your vision for technology in education and the education sector in 5 years? Just in 5 years, hopefully post-COVID. 30 seconds each.
Ricardo?
I thought you were going to go first. All right, no problem. You know, education for one-on-one is personal. It's for you. It's for the individual. Prior to where we are at now, education has always been known to be done in a classroom with 30 students to one child. But we believe technology can solve the problem where we allow you to get education and solution just for you. And so in 5 years, we're seeing a number of these smaller Caribbean governments moving towards a situation where there's centralized management of student data and records, and also the ability to know a skill profile for each and every child. Every child leaving high school should have a skills profile that kind of feeds into the workforce. And that's how we will effect change, by knowing where the people are, what their gaps are, and how we can improve them. Leanne?
Okay. For me, it's pretty simple, right? People are scared of technology and think it's not that for them. I want people to understand that technology is the means to the ends for whatever you want to be able to do, whatever you want to be able to accomplish, right? And harnessing the power of technology to catapult you to accomplish anything that you want, whether it be through upskilling, or we're talking about using technology here at JCS. So integrating technology in everything that we do instead of it being seen as an add-on or a separate separate thing, but it's incorporated in the educational system, how it is now, because we're doing everything online, to how can I use technology to upskill myself, to start my business, to do whatever it is I want to use. But so using it as a vessel, not as an end result of I want to use the technology, but how can I use the technology to do whatever it is that I want to do. It's pretty simple.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much, Leanne McNaughton, Chief Operating Officer, One-on-One Educational Services, and Ricardo Allen, CEO, One-on-One. You've given us a lot of food for thought, and we look forward to seeing how this story unfolds and again becomes a kind of blueprint for the transformation of education in the Caribbean. So thanks to you both. Leanne, this is the longest conversation that we have had in the past 2 weeks.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the forum. Okay, who do I turn back over to? That brings us to the end of this session.
If you guys can just thank you everyone for having us. So we'll now go back over to the main stage. So you'll see that I've always wanted to do this. Just go over to the main stage. And thank you everyone for joining the conversation, and feel free to reach out to us separately or join One-on-One's booth to learn more. Thank you. Bye.